Welcome, everybody. Can you tell me in the chat, if you can see that window, that you can hear my voice? And then Gemma will test.
I've already tested, Tony. Mine's fine.
Cool. And we have one more presenter who I hope will be coming in a minute, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, my camera is a bit weird. I've lost my other laptop, so I won't do the picture. Can you hear me though?
Yep.
We can all hear you. This is John, by the way. It's not that he's shy. We just had a few technical issues. So let's get everyone started. In the background, if you have any problems receiving us, put something in the chat. You'll see there's a window with a chat icon, and maybe we can help you resolve them. So let's begin. We sent you in our invitation this question to see if, not whether you could do it, but if this was the kind of thing that would scare you or your students, because this is the kind of thing that we're going to be focusing on today. A curriculum to prepare students for doing questions that are set in unfamiliar situations like this. But let's start with some introductions so you know what we're about. I've been doing essentially curriculum design for about 25 years. Some of the projects that I've been involved with, you may be familiar with. We started off with individual activities, resources like Science Update, and we've expanded since there into curriculum framework with AQA, and that was originally 3 years. Now we're on to 5 years, and we've gone further than that and actually tried to develop all the materials to put that into practice. That's me. Gemma?
Okay, yeah. I work with Tony at Mastery Science at the moment, but before that I was a teacher at secondary school, and I joined in Update as an editor for Update. And I've worked on all these projects with Tony. That's me.
Yeah, and so I'm John Farrant. I'm a head of physics, in Greig City Academy. It's a school in North London, and we've been using the Mastery Science resources since September last year, so 1.5 years.
Super. So I'm going to let Gemma kick off.
Okay. Did you want me to talk about this slide, Tony, or have you done enough on this? Oh no, we're going to the next one. Enough of introductions. Okay, so you'll be aware then that the Ofsted guidelines have changed quite recently, and they're now focusing more on what they call curriculum intent. So more about looking at what happens before teaching starts, as well as how it's implemented in the classroom. And so the quality of the curriculum is a vital factor that they're going to be looking at. So they will be asking you questions like what do you plan to teach? So the depth, the breadth, the complexity of the concepts you're going to teach, and why you teach it. So they'll be looking at that you're going to be ambitious for all students, and that you're thinking about what's important to focus your time on to make sure you get through the curriculum. And also when are you going to teach it? So looking at sequence, looking at planning for progression, revisiting ideas, and that you're coherent in your delivery. So there's some sort of things that you need to be looking at for your curriculum. And John's actually just been through an Ofsted inspection, so I'm going to invite him just to talk about his experience.
So we had ours. It was at the end of November, and they did a deep dive in science. Was one of the places they chose. That involved one of the inspectors was talking. We had a meeting with the head of science and asking about a curriculum plan and all those questions that Gemma's just said. and also like how are they going to remember stuff they were taught last year or 2 years ago or back in year 7, and all the stuff about progression. And then, yes, you went and visited some lessons. The same inspector went and visited some lessons, and then at the end of the day, we were invited back, people who had been observed, to talk about lessons. And the first question was, why were you teaching that lesson? How did that fit into the bigger picture? And yeah, so for us, that process, a lot of process was much easier because of this mastery approach, because of the blueprint curriculum plan. I think is that what you want me to say now? Yes?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so Ofsted say that this kind of rigorous approach to curriculum is nothing new. I'm not sure how true that is. I mean, how many schools actually have a properly designed curriculum that will reliably achieve a vision like the one we've got at the top there? We know that teachers are the most important factor in school learning, but even the best teacher in the world who just delivers facts, who just follows a specification, is not going to get students excelling at the kind of exams, kind of GCSEs that we have now. So as curriculum designers then, we look at, so what is important? Obviously knowledge is important, but most importantly, it's the depth of knowledge. So it's no good just giving students superficial understanding now. They really need to have a deep understanding of these concepts in science. And also they need to be able to apply that understanding to these new situations, like the question we saw at the start. Not only do they need understanding, but they need to have a wide range of skills. So the scientific enquiry skills, math skills, literacy skills, so they can transfer that knowledge and do those AOT questions. And also I would argue that as important as that, you also have, you want students to have science for lifelong learning. You want students to carry on with science after they leave secondary education. So you want them to be able to use and progress with science throughout their lives. You want them to be able to carry out a scientific process, to act like scientists, solve problems, make judgments, being able to analyse any data that they see. So that is a lot to pack in to a science curriculum. So how do you achieve this? So really, when you're thinking about sort of changing your curriculum in any way, it's really useful to do this design called backwards design. In that way, you're going to achieve an aligned curriculum. So what we mean by that is there is a match between your vision for students, what they will be able to achieve at the end of the course, and what you actually do, so the curriculum that you're planning and teaching. And it's really hard to design a well thought out curriculum that is aligned to your goals. Especially if you just start with a specification like the GCSE specification, which basically is just a checklist of things that students should be able to do and know. So this is the way that we've designed Blueprint. This 5-year plan is using backwards design. So of course, I went through a lot of curriculum outcomes that we want, but probably the one that you're going to get judged on certainly is GCSE success. And in the exams, as you know, they're very different to what they used to be. A lot less recall, a lot more applying knowledge in new situations and analysing and data and things like that. So we call these AOT questions problem-solving questions, basically. And one way you can help your students, which we've done in our mastery materials, is teaching them how to tackle these kinds of questions. And we break down how to do this into stages. And the first stage I've got here is called detect. And this is actually unpicking the question, thinking about what does this question mean? How do I answer this question? And it's a stage that students often find extremely difficult. And if they can't do it, then they're more likely just not to bother with the question, turn over the page and try and do the next one. So I've just shown you here kind of the things that they can start thinking about if they see this particular question. So drawing a diagram is really useful. Thinking about, well, what do I know? What has the question told me? What don't I know? What do I need to figure out? And then the next part of detect, which is important, is thinking about, okay, what concepts do I already know that I can use to answer this question? And as you can see from this slide, there is an awful lot of different things that they need to know. So science ideas, we've got balanced and unbalanced forces, weight, friction, vectors. So those ideas they're going to have started looking at in year 7 and building on throughout until they get to year 11. It's not just knowledge though, as you said before, we've got themes here. So this is how do scientists think? So if a scientist saw this question, what kinds of models are they going to use to sort out how to answer it? So we've got a couple of themes here, systems and models. They need to be able to draw force diagrams. They need to be able to think about friction, what is actually happening during friction, coming up with a mental model for that as well. And then the skill there, predicting from a model. So can they use that model to make some predictions? So I think that's me finished there. If you've got any questions as we go along, then please put them down in the chat and we will go through them. Tony?
Absolutely. Now, I hope Gemma has actually made the point to you really clearly that constructing a curriculum that allows students to kind of do any of these questions that examiners dream up is almost a job for a superhero. It's really hard, right? Now, we're not claiming we're the superheroes. We're claiming that you've got to be really on the ball and put into practice everything that we know about learning and all the tools at our disposal to make the kind of curriculum happen. And that's kind of saying why it's taking us, who are aspiring superheroes, so long to do this. Let's show you what's involved. Perhaps one of the most useful tools that we have as designers, and this is part of our secret, if you're actually doing this yourself, maybe you hadn't considered using this, is that curriculum superheroes follow a process. And it's the same process that engineers follow. It is this process of design. It isn't just coming up with whatever you fancy. There's actually some rigor involved. And the first part is what you've just seen from Gemma. It's identifying the problem that you have to solve. We've spent a very long time going through on our own these kind of AO2 questions to figure out exactly what students are being tested on. And when we've done that, we can move to the second stage, which is to identify what would make this curriculum, actually effective. What are the criteria for a curriculum? And equally important, engineers think about what are the limitations, what are the rules, regulations that I have to follow, because it isn't a simple process of just saying, I'm going to make a curriculum. It's got to do a lot of things. So to summarize, if you're going to teach for AO2 competence, the criteria there are being able to transfer conceptual understanding. As Gemma's identified, there are actually 3 dimensions of knowledge that you need. That means the science ideas, it means the underlying way of thinking, these themes, and it means inquiry and maths, literacy skills. Those 3 dimensions are all necessary. And of course, you've got to teach about these processes of detect and recall and solve and analyzing information. These are called cognitive processes that are behind AO2 and 3. So that tells us really the criteria of what an effective curriculum has got to deliver. And it's not all, because the Ofsted inspectors are expecting a progression. Of course, you're expecting, and the parents want, to make sure that the specifications covered. You know the power of assessment and to influence learning, so we need to embed diagnostic assessment in it. And we're all aware of the need to reflect how adolescents' minds work, how students learn. So that's a hefty load of criteria to achieve, but that's really what we're going to measure our success against. And at the same time, we've got various limitations. In other words, things that make this job hard. We've got to fit into curriculum time. So the question everyone asks is, yes, I like your idea for mastery, but I don't really see how you've got enough time to deliver it when there's so many statements. It has to fit, and it does. Of course, it has to be comprehensible. Teachers need to know what you can do to translate these statements into a viable curriculum set of units. From our point of view, it has to lead to mastery teaching. In other words, our previous version of Blueprint, we put in front of teachers in our sessions, and very often when we said, produce a lesson using this plan, they would end up saying, well, it's not very different to what I was already doing. We therefore thought, well, that solution was not effective. We have to, improve our design, because that isn't the purpose. It isn't to say, yes, you're doing everything fine. It is to say, actually, there is a mismatch, and this curriculum plan needs to show you how to put it right. So hence, we spent a lot longer trying to make it much more prescriptive and clear about what we mean in terms of the implications of this curriculum plan. We've covered how students learn as being important. Cognitive science is very important, as long as you take a broad view. We're not of the view, I call it a kind of Starbucks mentality. Like Starbucks kind of is everywhere. You can always see a Starbucks wherever you are in the world. In a sense, some people have adopted cognitive science in the same way. If there's any learning problem, more retrieval practice. That's the answer, isn't it? But you can spend all your time assessing and retrieving that you like. But if it's just at that low superficial level, as Gemma mentioned, that's not going to get you to AO2. So we really need to know the depth and breadth of what we know about the science of learning. And that includes the next item, addressing misconceptions, because science is hard and students are going to get the wrong idea as often as not. So we need to know how to build that in. We've got this challenge of 5 years worth of learning that you've got to be able to recall at the turn of a page. How do we do that? We've got to cover a wide range of specifications, and of course it's a design, and we know it has to work and be tried and tested. So that is a big range. That's a kind of superhero task. But it would be a lot easier if we did our research and figured out what has already been done to solve some of these problems. Because there's been a load of innovation, it's just happened in a lot of different places over a very long time period, and very few people know all the bits that we can synthesize into something that works. We have unashamedly stolen a lot of things from the NGSS, that's the American standards, because there are thousands of brains there that have been working over 10 years to try and construct a curriculum. I won't tell you how few it's happened in this country, and most of them are politicians, say no more, but that is a resource from America that we have drawn a lot upon. And if you've come to any of our longer sessions, you'll know that we're very big fans of the cognitive research that's called expert novice. And really that gives you a big insight into why students can't apply knowledge. They have a lot of knowledge, but like my book collection here, it's all messed up, and it's therefore hard to find what you need when you need it. On the other hand, what characterizes experts is not just how much they know, but it's how they've organized their knowledge. And they've organized it in a hierarchy. It's a very efficient way of finding what you need. More concrete example, as I'm a physicist, one of our big ideas is forces predict motion. That is kind of the way you're going to look at a lot of problems. In fact, the second part of the one Gemma showed you is all about forces predicting motion. As a physicist, you've kind of assembled all of your conceptual understanding into patterns like this, where you've got a kind of general idea at the top, very abstract, not something you can put on a PowerPoint and teach. And below that, you have situations that are to do with equilibrium, which I've labeled Newton's first law. You've got situations where something's accelerating and changing all the time. That's Newton's second law. And then you can go down a level and be more specific and say, okay, In Newton's first law, we've got to deal with this idea of resistive forces like friction, whether something's in a balanced situation, what does that mean? Dealing with vectors to kind of put forces together. And really what we're talking about, when you see a problem that you have never seen before, what your mind's doing is trying to categorize it and say, okay, I know it's to do with motion, I know it's equilibrium, which of these concepts applies? But you can only do that if you've got the structure here. So, bearing all that in mind, it's time we can develop an actual solution that meets all the constraints and criteria, that builds in all the research and addresses the problem. We are going to show you the prototype of that, which is a prototype and it's still requiring some feedback. And it started by basically unpacking everything in GCSE and saying, what are the fundamental principles that will, work together into that hierarchical concept map for each big idea? Because it turns out the big ideas, the explanations, are the most important kind of knowledge if you want to apply it. So that's the starting point, really. We've got a big idea, force to predict motion. We can break it down into its major components that we call key concepts, and there's a list of them here. And then we can start about organizing them in terms of, well, what's easiest to learn first, what builds on that, what's hardest. Most people would agree on an order like this. You might carve it up slightly differently, put it into different years. But the really important feature of this is that it's a big idea. You can't absorb it in one go. You need to come back year after year, revisit it from different angles. Each time you're putting your ideas together. So in a sense, what I showed you here, this is the result of 5 years of mental conceptual reorganization. And some students kind of report that after a few years, like year 10 or 11, they're starting to make sense of these ideas and put them together. And that's what happens when you continually revisit and deepen things. Okay, so that is the progression for each big idea. And we've got 13 of these. We have 100 concepts all in all. Let's go down a level. We're zooming in now and going, okay, what is it we need to know about each concept? This is, if you like, the knowledge for a unit. Remember, there are 3 different kinds and they all link together. So we've organized the curriculum around the science ideas. So here, friction, because that's what's used in the question, is at the center of this unit. We're going to link it to themes and processes. Every concept we link to themes and processes to make sure that students have consistently got practice at using those. And again, that will integrate that in when it comes to problem solving. It's kind of like, continual presentation, if you like, interleaving it all the time. So the appropriate ones to use here are systems and models, and we've got inquiry going on in the unit, so we've got interpreting evidence. And what you'll get when it's finished in Blueprint for every single concept, a key concept, is this. It's very fuzzy because you don't need to see the detail, but it's basically a long list of knowledge. And the knowledge is going to be described in a kind of pedantic physicist way where we know exactly when to use, what to use, how to use it. Here's a clearer version that's going to be more like what you eventually see. And you'll notice here that we've put it in terms of these 3 dimensions, but there's actually more going on because we've got these levels. You may think, uh-oh, national curriculum levels, I thought we got rid of those. But no, what we're talking about here is, in a sense, the depth of knowledge, the depth of understanding, the complexity of that knowledge. In other words, you need to know that because that's going to be relevant to how long you spend on that particular knowledge. Because you've got way too much stuff to give it equal weighting, and life's not like that. The important things count much more than the unimportant ones. If they don't understand what's in level 3, this idea that friction is an interaction of surfaces moving over each other, if they don't really get that, then they're not going to be able to understand that problem that we showed you. Of course, they do need the specific descriptive knowledge that comes underneath, but it's important that they spend lots of time, considering these surfaces and what's actually going on. So we've presented the knowledge in that way, in priority order, to make sure that, let's say, when you design a lesson, the main activity is focusing on the level 2 and level 3. These are the more explanatory ideas that students need to understand. And you'll see at the bottom, not only do we list the knowledge, but what we've given you is essentially the basis of a sequence of activities out of which students would construct an understanding and then apply it and then analyze it. So you could use that to design appropriate tasks. And if you've got these for all of the key concepts, then imagine that you're a student over time putting these ideas together, and in year 7 you do balance and unbalance, friction, and there's density, which is kind of a cousin. And then in the next year you move up to speed and distance graphs. You are layering on more complex ideas, and you're bringing back, revisiting the forces as you go along. So we're not talking about reteaching from scratch anything. If you follow this approach, students get to a high level of learning. They don't forget most of what they already learned. And that means that they can kind of reactivate it and reuse it every time they come back to that big idea. So we're continually building a kind of from a foundation up to the rest of the house of understanding as we get more and more complex and they start linking ideas together, and we have problems that address multiple concepts. So that's our kind of vision of how to get to the big idea. Forces predict motion. That would allow you to solve that kind of friction problem you saw. Okay, I think I've talked quite enough. And now what we really like is a bit of feedback from you. You can see the essence of Blueprint. Feel free to ask more questions, but what do you think? And also from our point of view, we'd like some feedback. I told you that we could give you as much detail as you'd want about the knowledge in each section, or just give you some, summaries. What would be most useful? Time for some feedback. Please chat. Okay, one question I can see is obviously about the format that you'll get this. It's looking now like it's going to be a website instead of PowerPoints, which are hard to update, not very flexible. We'll be putting each planner on its own web page with a unique link, so you can simply access it whenever you want to. You could print it out. So that seems to us the easiest way of doing it when it's finished, and we expect the first 2 years to come out in a few weeks, because we've now got every component in there, all the skills and themes, everything is mapped. More questions, more feedback. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question and then we'll move on. So this is from Wendy. How do we come up with the big ideas? Good question. We've skipped over that. We have basically used various other people's big ideas and synthesized those into 13. I mean, you might come up with your own list and end up with 10 or 15. Really, it's a matter of taste. But I don't think anyone disagrees on what they are. They might just kind of have a few extra or a few fewer. So R13 fitted well with what was in AQA GCSE, which is the beginning of our analysis. How about Gemma? You answer some of the other questions while I move on. So we've got a prototype for Blueprint, which is evolving and will continue to evolve with feedback. But we were also very aware that teachers would look at this and go, you know, I'm not quite sure what that would actually look like, because to be honest, it's not that easy to turn it into lessons that meet all those criteria. If it were easy, publishers would have done it. So we thought, well, we've got to actually have a go at doing this ourselves, because if we can't do it, we're telling people to do things that we haven't done ourselves. So as a result, we've spent the last 2 years nearly developing Complete Mastery, which is a set of lesson materials and assessments to cover this whole sequence. I'll go back to that and show you that kind of sequence from acquire to apply to analyze, covering all those different bits of knowledge along with all the assessment, is what we've put into this Complete Mastery program. And of course, it's got to engage students. We've got to use real life science contexts. And we've put together lessons for every big idea, key concept that cover all the knowledge and the skills and the themes, all integrated together. So how about we look at the one that would have essentially covered the frictional understanding that you saw in the exam question. That lesson is all about testing the grip on shoes. And as a result, students learn to explain what's happening when these two surfaces try to slide over each other. We actually give them one of the two models that scientists believe is happening when these surfaces interact. So, you know, that the jagged bits kind of catch onto each other, and that's what stops the sliding going on. And using that model, you can quite easily understand why it is that the bigger the weight you put on, the more the friction. And that's actually what the question is saying. So that we do cover coefficient of friction in a qualitative sense. We don't care about the equation. We want them to understand what are the quantities that affect the strength of that interaction. And that's the approach we take to everything. Okay, and so it results in this program, which is taking students to this AO2 and AO3 level. Now, my job is here not to sell the product. We are really trying to sell you the idea of a 5-year mastery plan in this session. But I wanted you to see that it's not just a plan, it turns into real lessons, because that is what John has been using to deliver the plan. You might choose your own course to deliver the plan. And now let's get to the testing. It's crucial for us to know whether it works. That's why we actually need the lessons to put it into practice. And crucial to us to have, we've got about 50 schools at the moment who are using the materials in their complete form. And I'd like to hand over to John, who can tell you a little bit more about his experience of putting into action.
All right. Okay. So we, as a few years ago, and we saw this mastery stuff coming out, and we really liked it. But just wanted to explain why we made the switch. For us, our key stage 3, we felt was, I don't know, it just didn't have any purpose. Our GCSE, we kind of expanded it down. It took over like a term year 9 and further, and then there was another term, and then we were doing it at the start of year 9, and the key stage 3 kept getting squeezed and squeezed. And we were trying to make it fun and interesting, but when we started GCSE, we would just start from scratch again. We would assume we didn't bother assuming they had anything learnt at key stage 3. And that was fine, because we got good results at GCSE. We're an inner city school, but our intake is lower than average, but we made good progress. And we had good progress scores with the old GCSEs. And while we did kind of grumble about, aren't we just teaching them a load of facts to remember an exam? but it worked the way we taught. And but then the new GCSEs came along, and we went from positive progress scores to like minus 1.2. I think it was minus 1. It was around there, and it was real shock. Yes, and it kind of meant we thought. I mean, this really helped us to make the dive and make the jump fully towards the mastery stuff. Because we realised that yes, our kids were the way we taught, but they were not equipped to answer these applied types of questions. It wasn't just the simple recall that we could help them with. Yes, and so we switched over to the mastery. It's helped us in two ways. So we've got this blueprint, this kind of 5-year plan that Tony's been talking about. It's meant that we've had that purpose, and it's been really nice to have that. There's so much thinking that's gone into it, and we can just take that for free because it's there available on the website. And then we've bought into this mastery science approach, which is a different way to the way we were teaching before. So there's lots of stages to it, but I think the most fundamental, those stages you will recognize, like, you need to find out where they are to begin with, and there's diagnostic questions and all that stuff once you've taught them something. But for us, it was something that we kind of did, but didn't really do it explicitly, which was before you start giving them information about something, you need to give them a chance to have a go and experience the concept or the phenomenon, and they have a play with it, and you have a concrete experiment or something where they are playing with concept, and then they get a concrete understanding, and then you start giving them an explanation of it. And that really helped us move forward. I think it's really helped our teaching. So if we go to the next slide. Back one. Thank you. So for our teachers, it's really nice. We really do feel like we have, all our topics count now. There's a real sense of purpose. We know that they've got to get this topic right in year 7 because they need to build on it in year 8 on the next year. And so that's it. It's meant that our year 7, year 8, when we're currently, those are the years that we're teaching, but it means that it feels like they have real purpose to them. And rather than, the way we used to skim from topic to topic to topic, and it felt like we had so much to get through, we actually slowed it down a lot now. And we realized that, if we're teaching gravity, we need to make sure we have a proper understanding of that, before we move on. It's much less about facts and words. It's about that kind of teach them a concept, and then you test them on, you give them a chance to, to really make sure they understand that. What's really nice, one of the nice things about the Mastery Science resources is their multiple choice questions that they developed. They really are, they've made sure they're aware of what misconceptions, there's lots of research out there about misconceptions on these things, but these multiple choice questions really hone in on those and try and tease out where students have misconceptions. And it's made us much more aware as teachers, and often, like, some of us have those misconceptions. It's quite funny. And some of the questions actually make you stop and think, and, they make you have a better understanding of yourself, and it's really good for the kids and seeing where they are. As I say, yes, it made us realize how bad some of the lessons were before. So we are, the way I teach energy now is completely different, having seen the mastery way of doing it, way that they've done selective natural selection and evolution. Again, it's amazing to realize just how bad we were at just giving them, 4 stages and trying to make them learn it when they can't apply it to anything. Yes, and it's really nice. You very much, it's an inquiry process. Students are encouraged to find out for themselves. Like I say, when they've touched on a type, when they release their unit for a topic like energy, I will then change the way I teach it at year 11 as a result. But the big proviso is that, it's it does require, it's not easy to pick up. So it doesn't, these PowerPoints and the things they provide, if you're used to just walking into a lesson and picking up a PowerPoint and going with it, it's not really, it doesn't really work. You have to really understand what the point of the activities are. And so some teachers have floundered with this. I floundered with a few of them. Sometimes the teacher who has translated, we take the resources and we try and make a PowerPoint, coherent PowerPoint from it. But then sometimes we lose stuff in the translation. So it's really, you've got to, especially these activities and these practicals that they're doing, you need to know the point of it and what kind of misconceptions you're trying to address a bit and how you're supposed to, what's the deeper understanding you're trying to get to. And you will get resistance if you do use it, because teachers will often say, well, I've taught this before. They learned it very well when I taught it before. Why do I need to do this new approach? And it's really, they will understand all about the formative assessment bits that are in there, but it's that approach of giving them a concrete activity and then going to play, and then you start to explain it. That's really important. Next slide. So for our students, one really nice thing about the Mastery Science approach is that they always have a hook for each of their topics. They always, if you've seen the old Activate resources, it's the same kind of thing. There's always that hook. There's always that kind of, why is this interesting, which is really nice. So we've noticed that our kids are much more engaged because of it. We find that low ability kids are more likely to pick up these concepts than before. It's no longer just those high ability students who are find it easy to deal with abstract stuff. You're giving them the concrete examples, then everybody is far better, more able to access it. These rigorous, you are doing this apply stuff from every unit. You're doing apply questions, and they struggle in year 7 with it, and students do struggle with these questions. But by the end of the year, our year 7s are far better at them than our year 11s were. We had middle ability, even high ability year 11s looking at the year 7 questions and going, I don't know how to answer that. But our year 7s can. And going back to this whole, when we start a topic, we will bring up Blueprint, this 5-year plan, and we will show them it. We talk about, we're working towards these big ideas that scientists use to explain the world around them. And we're going to try and get you this deeper understanding of it. And so bring up the blueprint, show them where they are on that journey. You did this in year 7 and now we're doing this. And I think that's really, it's really nice for students to be able to see that it's not just a random load of topics about the world. It's actually, this is a journey. And I believe that is my bit over. But yes, if you've got any questions, do put them in the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Do take advantage of John being here. Ask him anything you want, or you can even do it privately, I think. So we're basically done with our content. And all I'm going to show you now is, if you would like to kind of get a proper feel for what it is, you don't have to buy the whole program. What some people do is they just try one particular topic. And especially if you're trying to persuade someone else that this might be a good idea, then doing one would show you what's involved. So you can get those if you're interested from the website. We've got like 40 or so different topics now in year 7 and 8, and they all have these features of being engaging, covering all the learning stages and having the assessment. And hopefully we put into practice everything that we've showed you is important. So if you don't want that, then of course we are producing all of the Blueprint framework completely free for you to take and adapt as you wish. And I hope that will come out in a few weeks in its first form on the website. I did say that we wanted some feedback, so it'd be really good if anyone would like to say, oh yes, it'd be great if you included this, or we don't need that, because it is there as a tool. It's a tool there for you to improve the curriculum intent, so that you can face any inspector or parent or student who is asking you questions. You would have a sound, rigorous answer to why, when, and what you are teaching. I'm going to say farewell. Thank you, Gemma and John, for your great inputs, and for you for attending. Feel free to stay online and chat if you want, and there will be another webinar soon about a different aspect of our program. Thank you.